Rain hammered the windshield as Clara pulled up to the estate, a crooked silhouette against a bruised sky. The house had been abandoned for decades, yet the front door drifted open on its own, as if exhaling. Inside, dust coated everything except a faint trail of footprints that weren't hers. The air smelled like soil, and something older, something patient. She told herself it was just the wind, but the sensation of being watched crept beneath her skin like frost. The hallway stretched longer than the blueprint she had studied. Each step Clara took echoed strangely, as if the sound bounced off invisible bodies. Faded wallpaper peeled like shedding skin. Then she heard it, a whisper, too close to be imagination. Not words, but the shape of breathing brushing her ear. She turned sharply. No one. Yet the lights flickered as though something had just moved past her at an unnatural speed. At the end of the corridor stood a door reinforced with iron bands. It shouldn't have belonged in a family home. Beneath the door seeped a cold draft smelling of metal and rotting wood. Carved into the frame were symbols that pulsed faintly in the dimness. Clara tried the handle. It burned her palm as though freshly heated. When she pulled her hand away, a red mark appeared, perfectly matching the shape of a handprint pressing from the other side. As she backed away, footsteps thundered above her, heavy, dragging, uneven. Dust rained from the ceiling. The steps moved rapidly, unpredictably, as if multiple figures scurried on the upper floor. But when she climbed the stairs, the air fell silent. Only a long hallway waited, lined with portraits whose eyes gleamed with varnished malice. She had the awful feeling that if she touched any frame, the painted faces would exhale. One portrait drew her attention, a woman with hollow eyes, dressed in black, her expression stretched between agony and fury. The nameplate beneath read, Evelyn Harrow, 1893 to... The missing death date felt intentional. As Clara leaned closer, the painted woman's pupils seemed to dilate. The canvas rippled ever so slightly, like skin reacting to breath. Clara stumbled back, but the woman's eyes followed her, reflecting not the hallway, but Clara's own terrified face. A sharp bang made Clara jump. The attic door above the staircase had swung wide open. A rope ladder dangled, swaying as though freshly disturbed. Cold air spilled down, carrying the scent of damp earth and something sweetly rotten. Against her instincts, Clara climbed. Each rung felt slick, as if touched by wet hands. When her head rose into the attic, candlelight flickered, though she had lit nothing, and in the center of the room lay a child's doll, its eyes freshly painted with something dark and glistening. Clara reached for the doll. Before she could touch it, its head snapped toward her with a crack of old plastic. A tiny voice, warped and trembling, whispered, "She's still here." Clara toppled backward, knocking over a stack of boxes. As their contents spilled, dozens of identical dolls rolled toward her, their porcelain faces chipped and smeared as if gnawed on. Each one stared unblinkingly. At once, their mouths opened, releasing a low, vibrating hum that made her vision blur. She grabbed an old journal from the debris and fled the attic. In the hallway, she flipped it open. The entries were frantic. Evelyn hears scratching in the walls again. Another page. I think the house keeps pieces of those who die here. And then, smeared as though written in panic, do not open the locked room. It does not contain her. It contains the rest of us. The final page was blank except for a wet fingerprint that hadn't dried despite being over a century old. The walls trembled as though something inside them shifted from sleep to waking. Plaster cracked, revealing what looked disturbingly like veins pulsing beneath the surface. The floorboards warped, bending upward like ribs beneath skin. A groan vibrated through the structure, too deep to be the wind. Clara realized the house wasn't haunted in the usual sense. The house itself was alive, starving, and aware of her presence. The lights burst one by one, forcing Clara to rely on her phone's dim beam. A trap door she hadn't noticed before yawned open in the floor. Something below scraped and slithered. Her phone flickered, battery draining unnaturally fast. The walls around the opening dripped with something dark, warm and unmistakably biological. Whatever lived down there had been waiting, and it knew she was standing at the edge. When she descended into the basement, the darkness seemed to pulse. Her foot splashed into a shallow pool that felt thicker than water. As she moved deeper, a massive shape stirred. She heard bones grinding as if rearranging themselves. A voice rose. A chorus of whispering merged into one monstrous plea. Stay. The house remembers your name now. A pair of glowing, lidless eyes opened in the dark, each the size of her fists. Suddenly, lights burst through the black, dozens of faces emerging from the walls, as though consumed by the house and preserved like insects in amber. Their mouths moved silently at first, then began screaming without sound, a voiceless agony that pressed against her skull. Among them, she saw Evelyn Harrow, her eyes wide with eternal terror. Her lips formed the words, "Run while the house is distracted. It is hungry. It will wake fully soon." Clara sprinted up the basement steps as the walls convulsed. Tendrils of rotting wood lashed behind her, breaking through the floorboards like skeletal hands. The house roared, a sound of collapsing timber and human voices merging into a single howl. Doors slammed shut ahead of her and burst open behind, steering her like prey. The air tasted of blood and dust. Every direction she turned, the house twisted, reshaping itself to corner her. At the end of a shifting corridor, she found the locked iron-bound door now hanging open. Its interior glowed with an unnatural pale light. She stepped inside and slammed it behind her. To her shock, the room contained nothing but a single lantern and a dusty mirror. But as she stared into the glass, the reflection showed the house collapsing inward, except it wasn't collapsing. It was folding, tightening, pulling itself toward the room as though she were the last piece it needed to become whole. The lantern flickered, the mirror rippled like liquid, and a reflection stepped out. It wasn't Clara, but something wearing her shape. Its eyes were hollow and endless. "You belong here now," it whispered with her voice. Behind her, the walls closed like a mouth shutting around its final meal. Clara screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the dark, absorbed into the living, breathing structure. And in silence, the house stood waiting again, because it never forgets a soul it consumes.